I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The coffee shop on 3rd and Main was the kind of place you only noticed when you needed something quiet, a refuge between loud days and even louder thoughts. I came here almost every morning, same time, same order, black coffee, no sugar, room for 2 sips before it cooled. Not because I was picky, just something steady, a little ritual to start the day. She was behind the counter, as usual, mid-40s, maybe older, with a calm that didn't scream for attention but settled in the room like a slow breeze. Her hands moved like she knew the weight of the world, but chose not to carry it all at once. Today, as I stepped in, her eyes flicked up for just a second, and then, "Morning, Jake." "Black, right?" Like always. That small detail caught me off guard. I barely told people my name at work, and this place wasn't my usual hangout for small talk. She slid the cup across with a faint smile, fingers brushing the edge like she wanted to say more but didn't. I took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread and the city noise soften behind the glass. I noticed her watching me from the corner of my eye, folding a napkin with careful folds, as if she was trying to keep something neat that wanted to unravel. I wasn't sure when the attraction started. Maybe in the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, or how she glanced away when I caught her looking. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was in the quiet spaces between her words and the slight pause before she spoke again. "Rough night?" she asked, voice low, not prying, just noticing. I shrugged, fiddling with my phone but not texting anyone. Those unsent messages piling up like unread books. "Something like that," I said. She nodded, leaning on the counter, the kind of posture that said she understood what wasn't being said. There was a moment where the clatter of cups and quiet hum of early commuters faded, and it felt like the space between us stretched, fragile and full of things neither of us dared to say. "I'm Rachel," she said, as if introducing herself for the first time, even though I'd seen her here almost every day for months. "Jake," I replied, voice a little softer. She gave me a small, knowing smile, the kind that made you wonder if she had stories you didn't. Then, just before I left, she handed me a folded piece of paper. My name was written on it, messy but deliberate. "I shouldn't," she said quietly. "Boss says this is against the rules." I looked up, surprised. "What is?" "Talking too much. Breaking the routine." I laughed, the sound rough and honest. "Some rules should be broken." Her eyes met mine again, steady and clear, and for a moment I felt less alone. Outside, the city moved on, but I stayed with that folded paper in my hand, the quiet invitation hanging between us. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in a while, that felt okay. I unfolded the paper carefully as I settled back into the corner booth, the one she never cleaned fully, maybe on purpose. The creased note had her number scribbled across it. Nothing fancy, just her name and digits, like a lifeline tossed quietly in my direction. The next morning, I texted her, a simple, "Thanks for breaking the rules." Her reply was quick, almost teasing, "Don't make me regret it." We started small, like testing the waters with shy glances and brief exchanges. One rainy afternoon, she invited me to help her carry a stack of crates from the back room. It wasn't much, but the awkwardness in that moment stretched between us like thin glass. "I don't usually do this," she said, struggling with a box heavier than it looked. I caught the slight tremble in her voice. "Neither do I," I admitted, stepping closer. Our hands brushed briefly. A shock of something unspoken passed through that touch. Not quite comfort, not quite fear. She laughed softly, more to cover the tension than anything else. "Divorce papers signed last year. Took me longer than I thought to get used to living alone." I nodded, the silence wrapping around us like the slow drip of rain outside. For a moment, I pictured how different our worlds were. She with a teenage daughter somewhere in a different part of town, me still trying to figure out what I wanted from mornings and coffee shops and her. It felt risky, like walking a narrow path over a chasm I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. What would people say? A landlady and her tenant? Someone old enough to be my mother? But those thoughts were drowned out when she poured us both tea, awkwardly, like she was trying to make something ordinary feel safe. We sat at the little table, not saying much. I watched her fingers trace the rim of the cup, that tiny, repeated gesture. I wanted to ask her about the divorce, about her daughter, about the stories that hid behind those tired eyes. But instead, I just said, "You ever wish some rules didn't exist?" She looked up slowly, eyes searching mine. "Every day." Then, without thinking, I reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. It was a light touch, hesitant, but it lingered longer than either of us expected. She didn't pull away. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The days after that tea felt different, like something shifted between us, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. She was quieter now, her smiles a little shorter, her glances more careful. When I caught her watching me, there was a flicker, maybe doubt, maybe something she didn't want me to see. One evening, I stopped by the building lobby, hoping to catch her before she left. She was there, locking up the mailroom, but when she saw me, her hands froze for a moment on the keys. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. She gave me a quick nod, but didn't step closer. There was a pause, that awkward wait between words. I wanted to reach out, say something real, but my throat tightened. "Did you want to talk?" I tried. She shook her head, eyes flicking down to the floor. "I don't know what you want, Jake." That hit harder than I expected. I looked away, fiddling with the strap of my bag. Before I could answer, the building's door swung open. A neighbor, a kid from down the hall, someone I'd barely said 2 words to, stepped inside, eyes wide as if sensing something unspoken. Rachel's face changed, a mask slipping back into place. She gave a tight smile. "Hey, Mark." The kid shrugged, oblivious or pretending to be. "Long day." "Yeah." Her voice was flat. I lingered for a moment, wanting to stay close, but the distance between us grew again. Rachel tucked her hair behind her ear, a small gesture, but full of hesitation. We stood like that, silence filling the space, too loud in the quiet lobby. Then, almost on instinct, I stepped closer. Our breaths mingled, the air thick with everything neither of us said. I reached out, hand trembling, barely touching her arm. She didn't pull away, but didn't lean in, either. The moment stretched, fragile. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, the way her eyes held mine just a second too long. And then the kid cleared his throat behind us. We stepped apart. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. I don't know if I wanted to. It was late, the streetlights casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalk as we walked back from the corner store. The city was quieter now, just the occasional hum of a car or distant footsteps. Rachel kept her hands tucked deep in her coat pockets, her breath visible in the cold air. I didn't say much, but I could feel something simmering beneath her calm, that flicker of tension in the way she glanced sideways at me, then quickly looked away. "Did you see him today?" she asked suddenly, voice low. I hesitated. "Mark?" "Yeah." "What?" Her jaw tightened. "He was there longer than usual. Watching." I wanted to brush it off, but something in her tone stopped me. I watched her bite her lip, then shrug as if trying to shake off a weight. "I don't like it," she admitted. "Feels like I'm slipping, or maybe I've already slipped." We fell silent then, the cold filling the space between us. She stopped walking and looked up at the sky, hands still buried in her pockets. "Jake," she said, voice barely above a whisper, Do you think I'm crazy for feeling this way? For wanting something I shouldn't?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw the cracks beneath the surface, the fear, the guilt, the yearning tangled up in her eyes. "I don't think you're crazy," I said softly. Her eyes met mine, steady but fragile. Then she took a slow breath, as if gathering the courage to say more. "I'm scared," she said. "Scared of losing control, of losing you." The words hung between us, raw and unguarded. I reached out, my hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. For a moment, everything was still except our breathing. Then she looked away again. I swallowed hard, my voice almost breaking. "What do you want from me?" She didn't answer, and the silence spoke everything. She stopped answering my texts first, not suddenly, but little by little, replies getting shorter, slower. Then one day, no reply at all. I waited outside the coffee shop longer than I should have, watching her through the rain-streaked window. She moved like a shadow there, quieter than usual, folding napkins with the same careful fingers, but never meeting my eyes. One evening, as I stood there, Mark showed up again, the kid from the hall. Only this time Rachel's smile was different. Forced. A distance I hadn't seen before settled between us all. Later, when I finally caught her alone in the hallway, I tried to ask what was wrong, but her face shut down like a locked door. "It's complicated," she said, voice barely audible. She didn't say more, but I pieced it together over the next days. An ex who still called sometimes, a daughter who needed her in ways I couldn't reach. Things she didn't want to drag into this fragile space we were building. I felt the shift like cold water. Hope one moment, confusion the next, then the slow pull back, like a tide receding. I thought about knocking on her door, sending a message that said everything and nothing all at once. But I didn't. The chair beside me stayed empty, and I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I found her on the small bench outside the building, the one she sometimes sat at after closing up. The sky was a dull gray, the kind of late afternoon light that doesn't promise much. She looked up when I approached, but didn't move. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, voice even but soft. I sat down beside her, careful not to crowd the space. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Just the distant sound of cars, footsteps, and the quiet city settling into evening. "I should have told you earlier," she said finally, eyes fixed on the cracked pavement. "About my daughter, about everything. I was scared it'd change things between us." I nodded, feeling the weight of those unsaid words settling between us. "Maybe I was scared too," I admitted. "Scared of what I wanted." She glanced at me then. No dramatic flair, just a steady look. "Do you think this is worth it?" she asked quietly. The question hung there. Not about love or promises, just worth. Because everything we could risk was fragile. Trust, respect, the quiet comfort we'd found. I looked down at my hands, fingers twitching, and then back up. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I want to find out." She breathed out a slow, steady breath, the tension in her shoulders easing a fraction. Without another word, she reached over and touched my hand. Light, real, not a gesture of romance, but of connection. "Okay," she said, and that was enough. Weeks passed like slow, quiet ripples. The coffee shop on 3rd and Main became less of a backdrop and more of a shared space. The bench outside, where we sat sometimes after work, no need for words. The rhythm of black coffee in the mornings, exactly how I liked it, her smile waiting behind the counter. Our routines shifted but settled into something steady. No grand confessions or sudden promises, just moments that quietly said, "We're here." She'd bring the tea sometimes, with that careful folding of napkins that had once caught my eye. I'd tease her about breaking the rules again, and she'd roll her eyes, but never really deny it. There were days when the past lingered, a missed call, a glance toward the hallway where shadows still whispered, but none of it felt urgent anymore. We carried those pieces gently, like fragile glass, aware but not burdened. One morning, at exactly 8:47, I found her waiting at the coffee shop. I ordered the usual without saying a word. She handed me the cup, her fingers brushing mine just slightly, like a secret. As I took that first sip, I caught her watching me with something quieter than hope, maybe peace. And in that moment, I thought, maybe some rules are meant to be broken, but some connections are meant to be kept steady, without need for words. That was our kind of love. Not loud, not perfect, just enough.